Trifles. We need to talk. This is episode 4 of Heberts' Disciples.
All right, so let's talk about trifles. So what do you guys think the symbol of the bird? What does that symbolize, and what does that mean to the play?
I think the bird totally represents Miss Wright as a character, as this, beautiful, innocent thing. I mean, Mrs. Henderson, I believe, was the one who said it. She even says that, it reminds her of Mrs. Wright. And I think it's meant to show this beautiful creature that is ultimately taken by a man and just destroyed. And I think Mr. Wright is meant to totally represent like the destruction of men and their lack of remorse.
Yeah. I follow up with the bird cage even because they found the bird cage kind of disheveled and broken down, if I'm not wrong, and that really can symbolize how Mr. Wright is that their character?
Yes.
He really ruined Mrs. Wright's life and kind of killed her as a woman.
Like he trapped her.
Yeah. And through the feminist lens, analyzing it through that lens, we see that when a woman marries into something, it's a big commitment, and they're stripped of their life that they had before. It just ruins what they had.
So like a bird is so free, it flies through the sky, flight being a sign of freedom, and it's ultimately snatched out of that air and put right into a cage.
So go on.
It's especially true with Mr. Wright in this situation with the bird cage because he really traps her.
Yeah, he's characterized by Miss Henderson and the other woman, as they call this place, cold and gross, and it's dirty. I think it's meant to
the dirt symbolizes how dirty of a person Mr. Ray is.
It's unclean.
Yeah, so their marriage was her being stripped of her freedom and trapped in this metaphorical and semi-literal cage.
All right. We already kind of talked. Well, you just finished off with the cage, but I want to follow up on that question. What do you think the cage means, and who does it? I guess entrap. Let's talk about that.
In my opinion, it totally entraps Miss Wright, but I feel like it entraps women as a whole. Yeah. This play is definitely universal to the idea that men are, I guess, corruptive, and they take what they want and they exalt force on what they want and onto innocent women, and they strip them of their freedom.
Yeah, it's a clear feminist commentary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Jack.
That's all you, Dan.
And breaking that cage, and we see through this commentary of the women kind of breaking through that stereotype. They start to state their opinions, but at the beginning they're a little bit hesitant about it. They're like, whatever you think, right?
And
then there's some character development there.
Especially when the men are around, they're super hesitant. They're yes men to the men, be like, and they're not super outspoken. In private with the two, Miss Henderson, what's her name?
Mrs. Ryan?
There's the other lady. They're very
Miss Hill.
Miss Hill and Miss Henderson. They're much more outspoken and speak their opinion. And then I believe Miss Henderson is troubled in herself with what's morally right and what is right because her husband is the sheriff. The sheriff. And she knows what is right, which is to turn in Mrs. Wright. But morally in herself, because as a female, she understands how Mrs. Wright felt being kind of entrapped. She doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, that's an interesting philosophical contradiction there.
Do you think that what's it called? The reason why she was so hesitant at first was her idea of right was completely shaped by her husband being a sheriff. Because the sheriff is totally a symbol of law and control. And that control is literally, she's caged in it because she's married to him. And so she shapes all of her opinions based around what he thinks is just.
Absolutely. She's like the bird encaged in the cage. I mean, the husband gets to decide to do with her, and I guess in a way play with her just like you would with an animal. Right,
so
with the bird.
Once that cage gets broken, she makes her own decision to not provide the evidence for Miss Wright's what would be motivation.
I definitely think that's the central image of this play.
All right, let's move on to the next problem. I want to see your guys' meaning of the fruit. What does the fruit symbolize, or what does it mean?
I think it's the same thing with the bird. Before fruit's really flavorful, it's fresh. That's how her life was before this marriage. But then after it's all dried up, all the life is taken away from it, sucked up out of it. Exactly.
Interesting. I didn't take it that way. I could see it that way totally. The life is sapped out of her after the marriage, but I took it more as a symbol for what a woman is supposed to be according to men. They keep mentioning, oh, she'd be so sad if she knew her fruit, meaning she'd be so sad if she knew she failed as a housewife, because that's what we're allowed to infer that's what Miss Wright was supposed to be. She's supposed to be a perfect housewife, do what society expects of her, and not be her own person. And so when she takes out her anger on Mr. Right by killing him, Mrs. Hill and Mrs. Henderson, and that's more in the beginning when they're still trapped themselves, they're like, oh, she'd be so sad if she knew she failed at her job, even though it doesn't even matter, her husband's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. That's a great interpretation. A little bit unique from theirs, but
Yeah.
I can definitely see where that's coming from. All right. You guys ready to move on?
Definitely.
All right. So now I want to talk about the cold. So we've learned cold weather and just the being around cold and stories usually represents death. And in this play, we have two things that die. We have the bird, and we have Mr. Right, who is dead by the time we get to the play. But I want to ask, what do you guys think the death more represents? Is it more focused on the bird, or is it more focused on the dead husband, Mr. Right, or maybe a combination of the both? I just want to see your guys' view on
I
that.
think it's more so Mr. Right than the bird, because that's like the whole central, it's the whole reason for
What
the
started
play.
everything?
Yeah.
I kind of took it the other way. You
I
wanna
think
know?
I think it might be a third person, the death of Mrs. Wright as a human, or her and her soul, because the Mr. Wright was killed the same way the bird was killed, which was hung and their neck was strung, and Mr. Wright, he kind of ruined her world, and so she kind of got revenge back on him and killed him.
And now she's trapped in a literal cage forever. Possibly, we don't know the end result of the court hearing. But I kind of took it more as the bird, actually, because throughout the play, we're kind of, even though Mr. Wright's death is the precursor to the entire story, I feel like the bird is the only one that we're meant to sympathize with. Like, because it's from the perspective of Miss Hill and Miss Henderson, and they very much identify with Miss Wright and her struggles, they very much sympathize with the bird and Miss Wright as a character, and
Absolutely.
they really don't even like they say like Mrs. Henderson, because her husband's a sheriff, she's like, oh, that's bad, it's murder, but she's never like, oh, poor Mr. Wright. She never feels bad. She just knows that in itself murder is wrong, but she doesn't really care, in my opinion.
No.
Right. So who do you guys think is like the most complex character in this play, and like what are some things about them that make them complex?
I think it's Mrs. Henderson, just off of that philosophical approach of her, like, her inner struggle of knowing what's right and what is right. The moral right of the feminist thing where they're being controlled by man, but the moral thing where her husband's a sheriff and she knows murder and she should tell the truth that.
Absolutely agree. It's Miss Henderson for me. It's her confliction within herself of what she's been told is right and wrong, and what society and her husband has told her whole life what is right and wrong, murder's bad and all that, versus her morality confliction of, I get why she did it, like I can't blame her.
I agree. That was the exact thought process we had during the read.
We did go over a
of
little
it.
bit,
That
Jack went over
specific
that.
part.
All right. So now I guess let's get to the universal meaning and the theme of the play. So what do you guys this might be pretty obvious, but what do you guys think is like the theme, and how does this relate to our society now, or maybe show the change that has happened over time for this theme of yours?
I interpret the universal theme as women need to be free. I think it takes that, because with the constant, the ideas of flight and freedom and the entrapment of the cage and all of this, and when Miss Wright breaks free and the only ones who are there to save her are other women, and I think it's this idea of conformity and being with your group, and this idea that we don't have to marry, we don't have to put ourselves in this cage, we have the freedom to live the life that we want. We don't have to conform to society or our parents telling us to get married or whatever.
Absolutely. I think it's a clear feminist commentary, and not even entirely for women. What you were talking about, marriage, you don't always, I think this is about moving away from tradition and not conforming to it. I think that's pretty evident, even beyond simply the struggles that women face. This also just shows moving away, like the time period as they move away from tradition and go
like
more.
Nowadays, it's not a traditional woman much more. There's a lot more independent, have their own thoughts, this and that.
Yeah.
Unlike Trifles, which is presented much long time ago.
Yeah, but it shows but the play certainly shows the desire to be free and to have independence, be able to make your own choices.
Yeah, it's definitely to be vocal. Do what you want, be prepared, all that kind of stuff.
Not let someone else control you. And
Yeah.
guys,
Yeah, you are
stand
an
up for yourself.
You're
inherent
your own person.
You are
Yeah.
inherently you're a free bird that should not be put in a cage.
Yeah, you can't let like a bad marriage, bad relationship control you. You gotta break out and just stand up for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's all my questions, and I'd say that's a wrap to the AP Literature series.
We'll be back next year.
So
Well.
next year.
We're gonna continue this.
Heberts Disciples is going big.
You guys.
Yeah.